In the quiet expanse of the countryside, where the golden fields stretched endlessly beneath a bruised sky, a weather-beaten barn stood stubborn against the gathering dusk. Its wooden planks, grayed by years of storms and sun, creaked faintly in the rising wind. This was the heart of the farmstead, a sturdy relic amid the rolling hills, holding memories carved deep into its time-worn beams. Tonight, it seemed to brace itself, as dark clouds loomed ominously on the horizon, promising a storm that could tear through the tranquil landscape at any moment. Sarah had always felt a certain kinship with this place. At 17, she was the kind of girl who knew the rhythm of the earth, who found comfort in the steady hum of farm life. Her hands were calloused from years of tending the animals and mending fences, and her eyes, sharp and clear, held the calm confidence of someone who had faced more than her fair share of challenges. Tonight, she stood near the barn, the fading light casting long shadows as she prepared for the coming tempest. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. Beside her, Rex sat alert, his muscular frame coiled like a spring, fur bristling in the chill air. The K9 was no ordinary dog. A fierce black German shepherd with piercing amber eyes. He was Sarah's loyal companion and protector. Trained from a pup, their bond had been forged in countless hours of trust and teamwork. Rex followed her everywhere, his instincts finely tuned to her moods and movements, his presence a constant reassurance against the loneliness that sometimes crept in on the vast farm. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying with it the scent of rain and earth. Sarah's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the first rumbles of thunder rolled low and distant. She had spent the afternoon checking the animals, ensuring the horses were secured in their stalls and the cattle gathered in the paddocks. Now, as the sky darkened, her attention turned to the barn itself, a place that held more than just livestock and tools. It was a sanctuary built by generations of her family, a symbol of endurance. Rex suddenly stiffened, ears pricked forward as a low growl rumbled from his throat. Sarah followed his gaze to the barn's open doorway, where shadows danced in the flickering light of a lantern left hanging inside. The dog's eyes were fixed on something unseen, his body tense, every muscle ready to spring into action. Sarah's heart quickened. She trusted Rex's instincts implicitly, knowing that when he was this alert, there was often a reason. She stepped closer, her boots crunching softly on the gravel as the first drops of rain began to fall, cold and sharp against her skin. The barn door swung slightly on its hinges, creaking with a slow, eerie rhythm. Sarah hesitated, then called out, softly, "Rex, come on, boy. Let's check inside." But Rex did not move. Instead, he let out a short bark, sharp and insistent, then turned his head toward the loft above. Sarah followed his line of sight, noticing for the first time a frayed rope dangling precariously from the rafters, swaying gently in the draft. The sight sent a chill down her spine. That rope hadn't been there earlier. It looked old and worn, the fibers splitting and twisting dangerously. "Rex, what is it?" she whispered, stepping into the barn's shadowed interior. The air smelled of hay and dust, thick with the promise of rain. Her footsteps echoed faintly as she moved between the stalls, the lantern light trembling in her hand. Rex stayed rooted near the door, his growl growing louder, more urgent. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the barn's walls, carrying the distant rumble of thunder closer now. Sarah's pulse raced, a knot of unease tightening in her chest. She knew these old barns well, knew how easily they could become traps if left unchecked. Still, she pressed deeper, eyes scanning the shadows, searching for the source of Rex's alarm. Suddenly, a sharp snap echoed from above, and the rope swayed violently. Sarah looked up, breath catching. The loft was dimly lit, bales of hay stacked haphazardly, but something else caught her eye. A movement, subtle but unmistakable. Her heart leapt. Someone was up there. "Hello?" she called, voice steady despite the fear rising within her. "Is someone there?" The only response was the creak of the barn and the distant roll of thunder. Rex's growl turned into a low bark, as if warning of danger. Sarah's mind raced. Who could be in the barn at this hour? The farm was miles from the nearest neighbor, and no one was expected. She gripped the lantern tighter, stepping cautiously toward the ladder that led to the loft. The rain began to fall harder, pattering against the tin roof in a relentless drumbeat. Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn's interior in stark, fleeting brilliance. Sarah's breath fogged in the cool air as she climbed the ladder, each rung creaking underfoot. Rex stayed below, eyes locked on her back, ready to act. Reaching the loft, Sarah peered into the shadows, heart pounding wildly. The rope hung just inches from the wooden floor, the frayed end swaying with the barn's subtle movements. Something was tangled up there. Something, or someone, that caused Rex's fierce protectiveness. A sudden crack echoed through the barn as the storm's fury began to assert itself, wind rattling the walls and shaking the rafters. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the gloom, and then she saw it. A shape, a small figure, caught in the rope's grip, suspended awkwardly above the hay bales. Panic surged through her veins. Without hesitation, she called down, "Rex, stay close. I need you." The dog's ears twitched, his stance unyielding, as if guarding against an unseen threat lurking in the shadows. Sarah's mind raced, the storm's approach pressing urgency into every second. She knew she had to act quickly, but the barn felt suddenly like a cage, the impending tempest outside a ticking clock. As the first true gusts of wind rattled the barn door, Sarah steadied herself, preparing to reach out and free the trapped figure above, her heart tethered tightly to the steadfast presence of her loyal K9 below. The night was closing in fast, and the storm was not the only danger that had found its way to the old farmstead. Sarah's breath hitched as she steadied herself on the loft's uneven floorboards, her eyes fixed on the tangled form caught in the fraying rope. The storm outside had shifted from a distant threat to a roaring presence, rain hammering down against the barn's weathered roof, gusts rattling the walls with relentless force. But inside, a different tension gripped the air, one woven from fear, instinct, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. Rex's growl deepened, low and warning, as he stood rigid near the barn's open doorway. His gaze flickered between the shadowed corners and Sarah's figure above. The dog refused to leave the threshold, his whole body coiled in protective readiness. It was as if he sensed something Sarah could not, or perhaps he understood the danger that lurked just beyond the flickering lantern light. Sarah reached out cautiously, her fingers trembling as she brushed against the rough fibers of the rope. The figure suspended above was small, too small to be an adult. Panic flared in her chest. "Hold on," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "I'm coming." Her eyes adjusted fully to the gloom, and she could make out the shape of a child, tangled awkwardly, suspended by the worn rope that threatened to give way at any moment. The child's face was pale, framed by damp strands of hair clinging to their forehead, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and trust. The barn smelled of hay, dust, and rain, but beneath it all was the unmistakable scent of raw urgency. "Rex," Sarah called down, trying to keep her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Stay right there. Don't move." The dog's ears twitched, and he let out a short bark, a sound that seemed to echo off the barn walls like a warning shot. He refused to budge, his loyalty anchoring him firmly at the barn's entrance. Sarah knew Rex wasn't just guarding the door. He was standing sentinel against some unseen threat, something lurking beyond the shadows. The wind howled louder, rattling the lantern, which flickered dangerously. Shadows danced wildly across the beams, playing tricks on Sarah's eyes. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the storm, the peril in the loft, and the eerie stillness that surrounded Rex's stance below. Taking a deep breath, Sarah scanned the barn for anything unusual. The stalls were empty. Now, the animals safely secured earlier in the day. No sign of any intruder. But Rex's growls told a different story. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. She glanced back up at the child, who was trembling, trying to steady themselves despite the precarious position. "I'm going to get you down," Sarah assured, voice softening. "Just hold tight, okay?" The child nodded, lips pressed into a thin line as they clung to the rope. Sarah's hands shook as she reached out to untangle the fibers, careful not to cause the rope to snap. Each movement was deliberate, the fragile balance between safety and disaster razor thin. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the barn, a plank giving way under the storm's assault. Dust and splinters rained down, and Sarah instinctively shielded the child with her body. The rope swayed violently, and the child's grip faltered. "Don't let go," Sarah shouted, heart in her throat. Below, Rex barked fiercely, his eyes locked on the barn door as shadows shifted near the threshold. A sudden movement caught her attention, a dark shape slipping silently into the dim light, just out of clear view. "Rex, what is it?" Sarah demanded, voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. The dog growled again, low and menacing, his hackles raised. He moved a step forward but did not leave the doorway, his gaze fixed on the shadowy figure lurking just beyond the lantern's reach. Sarah's mind raced. Who could be here, in the middle of a storm, on their isolated farm? Her protective instincts flared. This was no ordinary trespasser. The tension in the barn grew thick, each breath heavy with the promise of confrontation. The child's voice broke through the chaos, small and frightened. "Please hurry," they whispered, eyes wide and desperate. Sarah tightened her grip on the rope, inching closer to freeing the child. The frayed strands threatened to unravel at any moment, the weight of the figure pulling dangerously. She could feel the fibers weakening beneath her fingers, the storm's fury shaking the very rafters above. "Hold on," she urged again, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "We'll get through this." Rex's bark cut through the noise sharply, a warning that echoed like a gunshot. The shadow shifted again, closer now, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness, their intentions hidden beneath the storm's veil. Sarah's eyes met Rex's, a silent exchange passing between them. They were a team, united by trust and the unspoken promise to protect. Her heart hammered as she worked quickly, her hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. The child's fingers were numb, their grip slipping once more, and Sarah caught them just in time. "Almost there," she whispered, sweat mixing with the rain dripping from the barn's rafters. The rope frayed again, threads snapping with a sickening snap. The child's weight shifted dangerously, and Sarah's arms burned with the effort to hold them steady. She glanced down at Rex, who was now barking fiercely, the sound a battle cry against the encroaching threat. The figure at the barn door stepped forward suddenly, a silhouette against the storm's fleeting light. The air was thick with danger, the night alive with the clash of loyalty and menace. Sarah's breath caught, but her resolve hardened. "Rex, stay," she commanded, voice sharp and unwavering. The dog held his ground, a sentinel against the darkness, while Sarah focused on the task at hand, rescuing the child suspended by the fragile rope. Every second stretched taut with peril, the storm's fury echoing the urgency beating in her chest. As her fingers finally closed around a sturdy knot, Sarah tugged gently, easing the child free from the rope's deadly grasp. Relief flooded her, mingling with the raw adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The child collapsed into her arms, trembling but safe. "Thank you," the child whispered, voice barely audible over the storm's roar. "I didn't know what to do." Sarah held them close, heart pounding fiercely. Rex remained alert, eyes bright with fierce loyalty, refusing to leave the barn's threshold. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, in the fragile sanctuary of the old barn, a silent promise took hold that they would face whatever dangers came next, together. The storm outside had settled into a relentless roar, rain lashing against the barn's weathered boards with a fury that seemed intent on tearing the world apart. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the shelter of the old wooden structure offering little comfort against the tempest's wrath. Sarah stood in the dim light, cradling the child close, her heart still racing from the near disaster in the loft. But even as relief washed over her, a new urgency pressed in, fueled by the low, warning growls from Rex. The dog remained rooted near the barn door, eyes sharp and unblinking, scanning the shadows beyond. His stance was rigid, muscles taut, every sense alert to the invisible threat lurking just out of sight. Sarah's gaze flicked between Rex and the darkened corners of the barn, a knot of unease tightening in her chest. There was no mistaking the message. Danger was near, and it wasn't going away. "Rex, what do you see?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the storm's cacophony. The dog's growl deepened, a rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. He took a cautious step forward, then stopped, his gaze fixed on the far end of the barn, where the shadows seemed to ripple and shift with unnatural movement. Sarah carefully shifted the child to her other arm, her free hand reaching for the lantern, casting its flickering glow deeper into the gloom. The rain pounded like a drum, thunder rolling overhead as the wind tore through the gaps in the walls. Every instinct screamed at her to stay close to Rex, to keep the child safe. But the uncertainty gnawed at her. "We're not alone," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "Someone's out there." The memory of Rex's unyielding loyalty surged through her, a bond forged through years of companionship and trials. She thought back to the training sessions, the countless hours spent teaching Rex to read danger, to protect without hesitation. Now, that trust was everything. A sudden movement caught her eye, a flash of dark fabric slipping between the posts near the barn's edge. Sarah's breath hitched. The figure moved with the silent grace of someone who knew these lands well, stepping cautiously toward the barn door. Rex's growl became a low, fierce warning, his body bristling like a coiled spring. "Stay back," Sarah called out, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "We're not looking for trouble." The figure paused, silhouetted against the storm's fleeting light. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice, rough and edged with weariness, answered from the shadows. "I'm not here to hurt you." Sarah's eyes narrowed, searching the dim outline. "Who are you?" The stranger took a step forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Name's Ben. I'm a friend, I swear." Rex's growls eased slightly, but the dog remained vigilant, a shadow of tension lingering in the air. Sarah glanced down at the child in her arms, then back at Ben. Trust was a fragile thing here, especially on a night when the storm had brought more than just rain. "What are you doing out here in this weather?" Sarah asked, her voice softening but still cautious. Ben shrugged, rain dripping from the brim of his soaked hat. I was passing through, saw the storm coming. Thought I'd check on the old farmstead. Heard some noise, figured someone might need help. Sarah studied him, weighing his words against the unease gnawing at her. The farm had been quiet for years, untouched by strangers. Yet here was this man, standing in the rain as if drawn by fate. Rex shifted, stepping closer to Sarah, his protective presence a shield against the unknown. The dog's amber eyes never left Ben, measuring, questioning. "Is that your dog?" Ben asked, nodding toward Rex. Sarah nodded. "He's more than just a dog. He's family." A moment passed, heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, a sudden crack split the air, a tree limb broken by the storm crashing down nearby. The barn shuddered beneath the impact, dust and debris raining from the rafters. "Looks like this storm's not letting up anytime soon," Ben said, glancing skyward. Sarah tightened her grip on the child, eyes flicking to the frayed rope still dangling from the loft. The memory of the near tragedy was fresh, a sharp reminder of how quickly things could unravel. "We need to get everyone inside," she said firmly. "The barn's not safe with this wind." Ben nodded, stepping inside fully now, the rain soaking through his clothes. "I can help." Rex growled softly, then relaxed, sensing the shift. He moved to Sarah's side, a silent guardian. Together, they moved through the barn, securing doors and windows as best they could against the storm's assault. The child clung to Sarah, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear, but also trust. A trust born from the desperate rescue moments before. As they worked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the night held more secrets than just the storm. The farm's isolation, the stranger's sudden appearance, Rex's unyielding vigilance, all threads woven into a larger tapestry of danger and hope. She glanced again at Ben, seeing not just a passerby, but a potential ally in the fight to protect what mattered most. The storm outside was fierce, but inside the barn, a fragile alliance had begun to take shape, one that might be their only hope against the unknown threats closing in. The wind howled louder, rain slashing against the barn's sides with renewed fury. Sarah took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. With Rex at her side and Ben now part of the equation, she steeled herself for whatever was coming. The night was far from over, and the battle for the farmstead and their lives was only just beginning. The memory of the rope's fraying fibers haunted Sarah's mind as she steadied herself against the loft's dusty railing. The child cradled protectively in her arms. Outside, the storm's fury battered the barn relentlessly. Wind howling through the cracks, rain lashing like needles against the worn wooden boards. But inside, a different kind of tension gripped the air. A fragile balance of fear and determination. Rex remained steadfast at the barn's entrance, his keen eyes scanning the shadows beyond the flickering lantern light. His growls had softened, but the protective edge in his stance never wavered. Sarah knew that beneath his calm, the dog sensed danger still lurking, unseen, but palpably close. "Ben?" Sarah whispered, glancing toward the man who had stepped into their lives just moments before. His expression was grim but resolute, eyes sharp despite the rain soaking his clothes. "I need to check the loft again. The rope, it might not hold much longer." Ben nodded without hesitation, moving to stand guard near the barn's door. "I'll keep watch. You call if you need help." Trust was a currency earned over time. But in this moment, Sarah had no choice but to rely on him. With the child safely wrapped in a blanket and settled on a hay bale, She climbed the creaking ladder back toward the loft, each rung groaning underfoot. The storm's roar was muffled, but ever present, a reminder of the urgency pressing down on every breath. Reaching the loft, Sarah's eyes locked on the frayed rope dangling precariously from the rafters. It swayed slightly in the draft, threads unraveling like brittle veins. The weight it had borne was a stark reminder of the danger they had narrowly escaped. But now, with the child safe below, the question remained. What had caused the rope to be there in the first place? Her gaze shifted to the loft's shadowed corners, where bales of hay were stacked unevenly. Then she saw it, a small bundle of clothes, damp and discarded, and a faint smudge of dirt marking the floor. Someone had been here, trapped or hiding, forced into desperate measures. A flicker of movement caught her eye, and Sarah froze. Behind a stack of hay, a thin rope coiled neatly, its end tied to a sturdy beam. Her pulse quickened. This was no accident. Someone had rigged this, intentionally. "Ben," she called down softly, voice steady despite the swirling questions in her mind. "We have a problem. Someone was or is up here. There's more rope and signs they were trapped." From below came the rustle of movement, then Ben's calm voice. "I'm on my way up." Sarah's eyes returned to the loft's dim corners, searching for any other clues. The child's frightened face flashed in her memory, and a surge of protective fire ignited within her. Whoever had been caught here was in trouble, and so was she. Suddenly, a creak echoed through the barn, louder this time, as if the building itself was protesting the storm's assault. A loose board shifted near the loft's edge, revealing a hidden gap behind the haystacks. Sarah's breath caught. The space was narrow but deep, disappearing into darkness. "Ben, there's a crawl space here," she said quietly, voice tight with urgency. "It might lead somewhere, or someone might be trapped in there." Ben climbed swiftly, joining her at the loft's edge. His flashlight cut through the shadows, illuminating the narrow opening. "Looks tight," he murmured. "But if someone's down there, we need to find them." Sarah nodded, heart pounding. The storm's fury outside was a distant echo compared to the claustrophobic silence that now enveloped them. She glanced back toward the child below, then to Rex, who remained vigilant at the barn's entrance, alert to every sound. "We can't waste time," Sarah said, swallowing the fear knotting her throat. "If they're trapped, they won't last long." Ben moved aside, letting Sarah lower herself into the cramped space first. The cold pressed against her skin as she descended into the darkness, the smell of earth and damp wood filling her lungs. Her fingers brushed against rough surfaces, roots, and the occasional scurry of small creatures disturbed by her intrusion. The crawl space twisted and narrowed, forcing her to maneuver carefully. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water, the scrape of her movements, the distant rumble of thunder. She felt the weight of isolation settle over her. But the thought of the child and the mystery above drove her onward. Ahead, a faint sound reached her ears, a soft whimper, barely audible over the storm. Her heart leapt. "Ben, I hear something," she called, voice low but urgent. A moment later, Ben's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing his steady presence. "Where?" "Up ahead," Sarah whispered, moving toward the sound. The tunnel widened slightly, revealing a small alcove where a figure huddled, shivering and weak. "Hello?" Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "It's okay. We're here to help." The figure stirred. A young girl, no older than 10, her clothes torn and dirty, eyes wide with fear and relief. She reached out weakly, trembling. "Please, help me." Sarah's heart clenched. "We're going to get you out." Ben knelt beside the girl, offering a warm blanket from his pack. "You're safe now." As Sarah helped the girl to her feet, she noticed the marks on her wrists. Bruises, faint but telling. The child's story was etched in the silent language of pain and survival. The storm's rage outside was a distant threat compared to the danger that had brought this girl here, trapped and hidden in the barn's shadowed confines. Sarah's resolve hardened. Whatever had happened, whoever had left the ropes and forced this child into hiding, they had to be stopped. Back in the barn, Rex's low growl echoed softly, a reminder of the watchful protector guarding their fragile sanctuary. Sarah's arms tightened around the girl, a silent vow passing between them, a promise to face the darkness together, no matter what lay ahead. As the storm battered the old barn, Sarah, Ben, and the rescued girl prepared to confront the hidden dangers lurking in the night, their fates entwined by courage, loyalty, and the unyielding will to survive. The barn groaned under the relentless assault of the storm, the wind rattling the ancient boards as rain hammered down like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside, shadows danced wildly in the lantern's flickering glow, casting an uneasy pall over the cramped space where Sarah, Ben, and the rescued girl now huddled. The air was thick with dust, damp earth, and something more sinister, a tension that tightened with every passing second. Sarah's eyes never left the girl, who sat wrapped in a threadbare blanket, shivering despite the warmth they tried to offer. Her small frame trembled, lips pressed tightly, as if holding back a flood of emotions. The bruises on her wrists, barely concealed beneath dirty sleeves, told a story Sarah was only beginning to understand. Ben stood near the barn's entrance, his figure silhouetted against the storm's fury. Rex, ever vigilant, paced restlessly, nostrils flaring as he caught scents mingling in the rain-soaked air. The dog's growls were low and warning, a soundtrack to the growing unease that gripped them all. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the barn, an ominous splintering sound that sent dust motes swirling in the lanterns. Light. The wooden floor beneath their feet shuddered, and a loose beam overhead creaked ominously. Sarah's heart jumped, fingers tightening around the girl's trembling hand. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, voice steady but edged with urgency. "This barn won't hold much longer if the storm keeps up." The girl nodded silently, her wide eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light and the storm's wrath outside. Sarah's mind raced, weighing their options. The barn was their only shelter, but it was fragile, its age and the tempest conspiring against their safety. Ben stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "We need to find a safer spot, maybe the old cellar. It's sturdier, built to withstand worse than this." Sarah glanced toward the far end of the barn, where a heavy door led down into the earth. The thought of descending into the cold, dark cellar was daunting, but the storm's menace left little choice. "Let's move quickly," she said, lifting the lantern higher. "Rex, stay close." The dog obeyed instantly, his tail stiff, eyes alert as they made their way through the cluttered barn. The child clung to Sarah, her grip weak but desperate for the security the girl offered. Every step was a battle against the barn's groaning protest and the rising wind's howl. As they approached the cellar door, a sudden movement caught Sarah's eye. A shadow flickering just beyond the lantern's reach near the barn's side wall. Her breath caught. "Who's there?" she called out, voice firm. No answer came, only the rustling of wet leaves and the relentless storm. Rex growled, ears pinned back, fur bristling. Sarah's heart pounded. They were not alone. Ben pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, sweeping the beam toward the shadow. The light caught on a figure crouched low, face obscured by a soaked hood. The figure froze, then bolted in a blur, disappearing into the rain. "After them!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging. But Rex barked sharply, blocking her path. "Wait," Ben said, grasping her arm. "We don't know how many there are." Sarah nodded reluctantly, tension twisting in her gut. The stranger's sudden appearance, the hidden ropes, the child's bruises, it all pointed to something darker than a mere trespasser. "Let's secure the cellar first," Ben urged. "Then we can figure out our next move." Inside the cellar, the air was cool and damp, a stark contrast to the storm's fury above. Stone walls surrounded them, ancient and unyielding, offering a semblance of safety. Sarah settled the girl onto a pile of old blankets, wrapping her in what little warmth they had. Rex circled the cellar, nose to the ground, ears alert. The dog's vigilance was a comfort, a reminder that they were not helpless. Sarah knelt beside the girl, brushing damp hair from her face. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The girl hesitated, eyes wide and wary. "Emily," she whispered. "Emily." Sarah repeated gently. "You're safe now." Emily's shoulders shook with silent sobs, and Sarah's heart ached. The night had been a nightmare, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the dangers she'd escaped. Ben stood guard at the cellar door, his gaze piercing the darkness beyond. "We need to call the sheriff," he said. "If whoever did this comes back, we have to be ready." Sarah nodded, but the thought of venturing back into the storm to find a phone filled her with dread. The farm was miles from the nearest town, and the night was far from over. "We'll take turns keeping watch," she said. "Rex and I will stay here with Emily. Ben, you scout the perimeter when it's safe." The dog settled beside the girl, his warm body a protective shield. Emily's small hand reached out hesitantly to stroke Rex's fur, finding comfort in the loyal canine's presence. Hours passed in a tense vigil, the storm's rage gradually subsiding to a dull roar. Outside, the rain eased, but the night remained heavy with uncertainty. Shadows seemed to cling to every corner, and the threat of return lingered like a dark cloud. Suddenly, a faint noise drifted from above, a soft scraping, barely audible but unmistakable. Sarah's breath hitched. Rex's ears perked, and he rose slowly, hackles raised. "Someone's here," Ben whispered, voice tight with caution. They moved silently toward the cellar steps, hearts pounding in unison. The noise grew, a faint shuffle, the scrape of boots against wood. Sarah's hand found Ben's, gripping tightly. As the cellar door creaked open, a figure slipped inside. A woman, soaked and shivering, eyes wild with fear and relief. "I was looking for Emily," she gasped. "I'm her sister." Relief and new questions flooded through Sarah. The storm had brought more than rain to this old farmstead. It had unearthed secrets, dangers, and the fragile threads of hope that now bound them together. Rex barked softly, greeting the newcomer as Sarah and Ben prepared to face whatever came next. The night's trials were far from over, but united, they stood ready against the darkness closing in. The storm had reached its peak, howling like a beast unleashed, battering the old barn as if intent on tearing it from the earth. Inside the cellar, the air was thick with tension and dampness, the only light a flickering lantern casting long, jittery shadows against the stone walls. Sarah held Emily close, her arms a protective shield around the frightened child, while Ben stood guard near the entrance, eyes sharp and alert. Rex lay quietly by their feet, ears twitching at every sound beyond the cellar door. The woman who had slipped inside moments before, Emily's sister, sat huddled against the cold stone, shivering despite the thin blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes darted nervously toward the darkened staircase, haunted by memories too heavy for words. Sarah's heart ached at the sight, understanding the unspoken terror that had driven these girls to seek refuge in such a desperate place. Suddenly, a sharp, muffled noise fractured the cellar's fragile calm. A heavy thud, followed by the scrape of boots on wood. Ben's gaze snapped to the door, muscles tensing. "They're coming," he whispered, voice low but urgent. Rex rose immediately, hackles raised, letting out a deep, warning growl that reverberated through the confined space. Sarah's grip on Emily tightened as the dim lantern light flickered violently, casting eerie shapes against the walls. The storm outside seemed to dim in comparison to the danger closing in around them. Without hesitation, Ben moved toward the cellar door, flashlight in hand. He peered cautiously into the darkness, the beam slicing through the blackness to reveal shadowy figures moving stealthily amid the storm's fury. More than one, armed, cautious, and clearly intent on finding whoever was hiding within the barn. Sarah's breath hitched, her mind racing. The ropes, the bruises, the hidden crawl space, all pieces of a sinister puzzle now coming sharply into focus. This was no random encounter. They were being hunted. "Ben, be careful," she warned, voice steady despite the rising panic. "We don't know how many there are." Ben nodded grimly, signaling for silence as he retreated back inside. "They're searching," he said. "We need to stay hidden and find a way out." The cellar was cramped, a labyrinth of stone and shadows. Sarah's eyes scanned the walls, searching for an escape route. Her fingers brushed against cold, damp bricks until she felt the rough edge of a loose stone. She tugged gently, and to her surprise, the stone gave way, revealing a narrow tunnel behind it. "Here," she whispered urgently, motioning for the others. "A crawl space. It might lead outside." Emily and her sister exchanged fearful glances, but the urgency in Sarah's voice left no room for hesitation. Together, they began to crawl into the dark passage, the tunnel tight and claustrophobic, the air thick with dust and the scent of earth. Rex followed closely, his body low and alert, muscles coiled for action. The tunnel twisted and sloped downward, forcing them to move carefully, every sound amplified in the confined space. Above, the storm roared, but down here it was a silent race against time. Behind them, muffled voices echoed faintly, searchers drawing closer, their flashlights sweeping the barn in a relentless hunt. Sarah's heart pounded, adrenaline sharpening her senses as she led the group through the maze of shadows. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a small, hidden exit, a narrow gap barely wide enough for a person to slip through. Outside, the rain had softened to a steady drizzle, the storm's anger spent, but the night still cloaked in darkness. Sarah helped Emily out first, then her sister before squeezing through herself. Rex was the last, slipping out with a low growl that warned of his readiness to defend at a moment's notice. They found themselves in a dense thicket of trees, the forest surrounding the farm like a protective barrier. The rain soaked their clothes, but the fresh air was a balm after the suffocating cellar. "Come on," Sarah urged, glancing back toward the barn where faint lights flickered in the storm's aftermath. "We need to get to the house and call for help." The group moved swiftly through the underbrush, branches clawing at their faces and clothes, but the urgency propelled them forward. Emily clung tightly to Sarah's hand, her small fingers trembling but determined. As they neared the farmhouse, a sudden crack shattered the night, a gunshot sharp and echoing through the trees. Everyone froze, hearts pounding in unison. "Stay down," Ben hissed, pulling them behind a fallen log. "They're still out there." Sarah's mind raced. Whoever was hunting them was armed and dangerous, willing to escalate to violence. The farmstead, at once a place of safety, had become a battleground. Rex growled low, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the trees. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. Protecting these girls, facing down the unknown enemy. It was a fight she hadn't expected, but was determined to see through. The night stretched on, a tense standoff between those hunted and the hunters. Sarah's thoughts flickered to the future. How to keep Emily and her sisters safe. How to expose the darkness that had invaded their lives. As the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the storm finally ceased, leaving behind a world washed clean but forever changed. Sarah tightened her grip on Emily's hand, feeling the steady pulse of life and hope amidst the lingering shadows. Together, with Ben and Rex by her side, she prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that courage and loyalty were their strongest weapons against the darkness still lurking beyond the trees. The rope frayed even more, the strands threatening to snap with every gust of wind that battered the old barn's timbers. Sarah's arms trembled as she clung to the smaller line that now bore the weight of both her and the child, suspended precariously above the hay-covered floor. The storm's fury pressed around them, rain lashing through gaps in the walls, thunder rolling like distant cannons. But their immediate danger was far more urgent. The rope was unraveling fast, and time was running out. Below, Rex stood firm, muscles taut, eyes blazing with fierce determination. The dog's growl was low and steady, a warning that cut through the chaos. Sarah glanced down and saw the dog's jaws clenched tightly around a thick rope lying coiled near a broken post. Without hesitation, Rex began pulling, the strain visible in his powerful frame as he anchored the rope with all his might. "Good boy, Rex," Sarah whispered, trying to steady her breath despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. Her fingers fumbled desperately, working to secure the smaller line around a sturdy beam overhead. But the wood was slick with rain, making the task nearly impossible. The child's small hands gripped Sarah's jacket, eyes wide with fear but trusting. "Please, don't let me fall," the child whispered, voice trembling. "I won't," Sarah promised, voice firm despite the terror knotting her stomach. "Hold on just a little longer." The barn creaked ominously, a deep groan that echoed through the rafters. The wind howled louder, rattling the lantern perched precariously nearby. A sudden burst of lightning illuminated the space, revealing the fragile thread holding them suspended. The rope twisted and snapped a few strands, sending a shiver through Sarah's arms. With a sharp bark, Rex tightened his grip on the rope, pulling with renewed strength. Sarah's eyes met the dog's, the unspoken bond between them a lifeline in the storm's chaos. She shifted her weight, trying to ease the pressure on the fraying line, but the child's weight made it nearly impossible. "Rex, help me," Sarah called urgently, her voice cracking. The dog responded instantly, tugging harder on the rope, his paws digging into the dirt floor for leverage. The barn seemed to shudder under the storm's assault, and a loose plank crashed to the ground nearby, sending a shower of splinters into the air. Sarah took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength left in her aching arms and legs. She wrapped the rope around her wrist, anchoring herself to the beam, giving Rex's efforts a fighting chance. Slowly, agonizingly, the tension eased as Rex's pull began to lift them upward. "Almost there," Sarah whispered, voice hoarse. Her fingers found the child's jacket, gripping tightly as she began to haul them both up, inch by inch. The rope groaned under the strain, fibers snapping here and there, but Rex's steadfast pull kept the line taut and steady. Below, the dog's eyes never wavered from Sarah and the child, his every muscle straining to hold the fragile lifeline. The storm's fury continued unabated, But within the barn's battered walls, a silent battle was being waged. A fight for survival powered by courage, trust, and unbreakable loyalty. As Sarah's arms burned and her legs trembled, the beam above finally came into reach. With a final, desperate effort, she grasped it and pulled herself over the edge, dragging the child safely into the loft's relative safety. They collapsed onto the hay-strewn floor, breathless and soaked, but alive. Rex bounded up the ladder moments later, tongue lolling, eyes bright with triumph. Sarah reached down, ruffling his damp fur as relief washed through her in a warm wave. "We made it," she said softly, voice thick with emotion. The storm outside continued its relentless pounding, but inside the barn, the bond between a girl and her canine had turned the tide against the chaos. In that moment, surrounded by the battered walls and the howling wind, they found strength in each other, a testament to loyalty, courage, and the fight to protect those we love at all costs. The storm's fury began to wane, its relentless roar softened to a steady drumbeat against the battered barn. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of wet hay and earth, mingled with the unmistakable warmth of relief. Sarah lay on the loft's floor, her arms wrapped tightly around the child, who trembled less now, comforted by the safety they had fought so hard to reach. Rex sat close by, his chest rising and falling in calm rhythm, eyes bright and watchful as if still guarding against unseen threats. The barn groaned softly under the settling wind, but within its time-worn walls, a fragile peace had taken hold. Sarah's fingers gently stroked the child's damp hair, the bond between them deeper now, not just of rescue, but of trust and unspoken understanding. The child's wide eyes met hers, gratitude shining through the exhaustion. "You're safe now," Sarah whispered, voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at her limbs. "I won't let anything happen to you." The child nodded, a small, weary smile breaking through the shadow of fear. "Thank you for saving me." Sarah's gaze shifted downward to Rex, who nuzzled the child gently, his loyal presence a living shield. The dog's unwavering devotion had been their lifeline, a steadfast force in the midst of chaos. Watching the gentle exchange between canine and child, Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for the bond they shared. Below, the barn's floor was littered with broken boards and scattered hay, the remnants of the storm's wrath. Sarah glanced down and knew their sanctuary was fragile. But for now, it held. She pressed her hand against the rough wood, drawing strength from its resilience, much like the spirit that had carried them through the night. The distant rumble of thunder faded, replaced by the soft patter of rain easing into a gentle drizzle. Outside, the world was washed clean, but scarred, a reminder of the battle they had endured. The farmstead, battered but standing, was a testament to endurance and the quiet courage found in the smallest of places. Sarah shifted, careful not to disturb the child's rest, and let her eyes drift to the barn's open doorway, where the first pale light of dawn crept cautiously over the horizon. The mist rolled in low across the fields, wrapping the land in a silver embrace that promised a new beginning. Rex's ears pricked at the soft sounds of morning, the distant call of a bird, the rustle of leaves stirred by the gentle breeze. The dog rose, stretching his powerful frame, then settled back next to Sarah, his steady presence a comfort in the fragile quiet. Sarah's thoughts turned to the days ahead, repairs to be made, wounds to be healed, and the promise of safety to be secured. She knew the storm had exposed more than just the barn's weaknesses. It had uncovered dangers lurking in the shadows of their lives. But it had also revealed the strength of their bonds, the unbreakable ties between a girl, her canine, and the child they had saved. As the sun's first rays filtered through the cracks in the barn walls, Sarah felt a quiet determination settle within her. They had survived the night's ordeal, but the fight was far from over. Together, they would rebuild, protect, and face whatever challenges awaited, united by courage and the unwavering loyalty that had carried them through the darkest hours. The child stirred, eyes fluttering open to meet Sarah's steady gaze. A soft smile blossomed as the child whispered, "I feel safe with you and Rex." Sarah smiled back, heart swelling with a protective warmth. "That's because you are." Outside, the farm awoke slowly, the world returning to life after the storm's passage. Inside the barn, the bond between Sarah, the child, and their steadfast K9 stood as a beacon of hope, a testament to the courage born from compassion and the power of unwavering trust in the face of adversity. The morning sun spilled over the horizon, casting golden light across the battered farmstead. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape washed clean, though scarred by the night's fury. Sarah stood outside the barn, the fresh air filling her lungs as she took in the scene, the broken boards, scattered hay, and the silent testament to the battle they had endured. Yet, amidst the ruin, there was a quiet strength, a resilience that mirrored her own. Emily sat nearby, wrapped in a thick blanket, her eyes still wide but less shadowed by fear. She watched as Rex padded around the yard, nose to the ground, ever vigilant despite the calm. The loyal K9 was more than a protector. He was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, courage and loyalty could prevail. Neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the storm's aftermath and whispers of the night's events. Faces filled with concern and curiosity approached cautiously, their eyes lingering on the trio standing by the barn. Sarah's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and resolve. The community had always been quiet but close-knit, bound by shared struggles and unspoken support. A few neighbors offered tools and warm drinks, their kindness a balm to the raw edges left by the storm. Sarah accepted with a nod, feeling the weight of their unspoken solidarity. This was more than just a farm. It was a home, a sanctuary built not just on land, but on the strength of its people. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Sarah sat with Emily on the porch of the farmhouse, the child's small hand resting trustingly in hers. The bruises on Emily's wrists had faded slightly, thanks to the care Sarah and Ben had provided. But the deeper wounds, the ones carved by fear and pain, would take longer to heal. "I'm glad you're here," Emily whispered, her voice soft but steady. Sarah smiled, warmth in her eyes. "We're going to keep you safe. That's a promise." Rex lay at their feet, his eyes half closed but alert, ever watchful. The bond between the girl, the child, and the dog had deepened through the trials they had faced. It was a bond forged in the crucible of danger and strengthened by unwavering trust. As the day wore on, the community rallied around them, offering support in tangible ways, help to repair the barn, meals to ease their hunger, and quiet conversations that reminded them they were not alone. Sarah felt a surge of hope, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the fading light of afternoon, Sarah stood once more near the barn, watching Rex as he played gently with Emily, the child's laughter a fragile but precious sound. The storm had tested them all, but it had also revealed the depth of their resilience and the power of connection. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the future, a future where safety was reclaimed, where wounds healed, and where the bond between a girl and her K9 continued to protect those they loved. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was theirs to walk together. As neighbors shared stories of courage and kindness, Sarah felt the quiet strength of community wrap around her like a shield. The farmstead, scarred but unbroken, stood as a testament to the spirit that refused to yield. With Rex by her side and Emily's hand in hers, Sarah knew they were ready to face whatever came next. The storm had passed, but their fight for peace and safety was only beginning, and together, they would stand strong. The afternoon sun dipped low over the rolling fields, casting long shadows that stretched across the farmstead like a gentle embrace. The storm had passed, but its lessons lingered in the air. Reminders of fragility, courage, and the unyielding power of trust. Sarah stood on the porch, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sky burned with hues of amber and rose. The promise of a new day settling over the land. Beside her, Emily's small hand rested in hers, a quiet testament to the bond forged in the crucible of the barn's harrowing night. The child's face, once etched with fear, now held the light of hope, a fragile but growing flame nurtured by safety and kindness. At their feet, Rex lay calmly, his gaze soft but alert, ever the guardian of their fragile peace. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude as she watched the two. The child she had saved and the loyal K9 whose unwavering devotion had been their lifeline. Their story was one of courage, born from crisis, of resilience shaped by the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog. It was a tale that spoke to the deepest human truths, that in the darkest moments, connection and trust could light the way. The community at Valby-Borod rallied around them, offering more than just aid. They had given strength, a shared resolve to stand against the shadows that threatened their lives. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now gathered in the warmth of shared experience, their voices weaving a tapestry of hope and solidarity. As twilight deepened, Sarah felt a stirring within her, a call to action that extended beyond the farm's boundaries. The dangers they had faced were not isolated. Shadows lurked in many places, and the courage to confront them must be a beacon for all who found themselves in need. Turning to Emily, Sarah spoke softly. "Your story matters. Your courage matters. And together, we can help others find their light just like we did." Emily smiled, the weight of her past momentarily lifted by the promise of purpose. Rex nudged her gently, a silent affirmation of the journey ahead. The sun finally slipped below the horizon, leaving a sky awash with stars, a vast canvas of possibility. Sarah inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse of life and hope in the cool evening air. The fight for safety, for justice, and for the bond between humans and their faithful companions was far from over. But in this moment, surrounded by the quiet strength of family, community, and an unbreakable K9, Sarah knew they were ready. Ready to face the challenges to come, ready to stand tall against the darkness, and ready to carry forward a message of courage and compassion. As the night settled in, the farmstead stood as a beacon, a place where trust was the strongest shield, and where the love between a girl and her dog could inspire all who heard their story to stand against injustice and protect those who could not protect themselves. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, they were unstoppable.